House of Mirrors. You know, New Orleans is a wild place. I moved here to start fresh after a messy breakup. Figured the vibrant life of Mardi Gras could help me forget, and maybe even find new friends. That's how I ended up at the Carnival with a bunch of colleagues from my new job. I'm Michael Thompson, by the way. Just a regular guy trying to blend in and move on. But there's this thing about me. I've got this fear of enclosed spaces. Stems from this incident back when I was a kid. Got locked in a dark basement for hours. Ever since then, tight, dark places freak me out. Anyway, Mardi Gras was in full swing, and the streets were packed with people. We were having a great time, laughing, eating, and just soaking in the chaos. The House of Mirrors caught our eye. My friends thought it would be hilarious to see ourselves all twisted up in the reflections. I wasn't thrilled, but didn't want to seem like a downer, so I went along. As soon as we stepped inside, it was confusing. Mirrors everywhere, making you feel like you were going in circles. We were all laughing at first, making fun of our distorted faces. The air was cool, almost too cold, and there was this faint smell of something like cleaning chemicals. Then, the lights started to flicker. It was subtle at first, just a quick blink, but it felt off. We heard this scraping noise, like metal dragging on metal. I thought it was part of the show, you know, to add a bit of scare factor. But it started getting louder, more irregular. That's when Sarah, one of my friends, noticed something strange. "Hey, did you guys see that?" she said, pointing to a mirror where a shadowy figure stood in the corner. We turned around, but there was nothing there. Just us and our reflections. We laughed it off, thinking it was just our minds playing tricks. But then it happened again, in another mirror, closer this time. The figure, masked and motionless, sent a chill down my spine. "Maybe it's only some kind of setup, you know, to scare us," I said, trying to calm myself in the group. Mark, another friend, nodded. "Yeah, probably just part of the fun. Let's keep moving." We kept going, but the mirrors started showing weird things. Reflections of us looking scared or hurt. It was unsettling. I caught another glimpse of the masked figure, closer and clearer. This was no gimmick. As we got deeper, we got more separated. The mirrors seemed to stretch the maze endlessly. My phone lost signal, and suddenly, I felt completely isolated. Then I heard a scream, distant and muffled. It sounded like Mark. I ran towards it, but every turn led me to another dead end. I came across this old man, looked like the Carnival's maintenance guy. He gave me a weird look and muttered, "The mirrors trap more than just reflections." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Just be careful," he said, shaking his head as he walked away. His words echoed in my mind as I continued. My friends were nowhere to be found, and the place felt like it was closing in on me. Each step I took seemed to lead me further into a nightmare. The laughter and music of the carnival were now just faint whispers. Looking back, I should have trusted my gut. Something was terribly wrong, and every reflection seemed to mock me, showing a reality that felt too real to be fake. I was alone, trapped in a maze of mirrors, with only my distorted fears to keep me company. As I ventured deeper into the House of Mirrors, the atmosphere grew more unnerving. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, and every step echoed with an unnatural stillness. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder that I needed to get out, but the maze seemed endless. I started noticing little things that set me on edge. The mirrors weren't just reflecting our images anymore. Some showed empty corridors, others distorted versions of reality. One mirror showed me with a gash across my forehead, blood trickling down my face. I touched my head, but there was nothing there. It felt too real to be a trick. The scraping noise grew louder, almost like it was following me. I turned a corner and saw Mark's reflection again, this time looking terrified. He was mouthing something, but I couldn't hear him. I rushed towards the mirror, but the image dissolved into a twisted version of my own reflection. "Mark, where are you?" I yelled, my voice bouncing off the mirrored walls. No answer. Just my panicked face staring back at me from countless angles. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move forward. The air was getting colder, and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals was now mixed with something metallic. Blood. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Then, I saw it again. The masked figure, this time in the reflection, just a few feet away. It stood there, silent and menacing, holding a long, gleaming knife. My stomach turned, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I spun around, expecting to face my attacker, but there was nothing. Just more mirrors and more confusion. I stumbled forward, my breath quickening. My instinct screamed at me to find an exit, but every turn led me deeper into the labyrinth. The lights flickered again, plunging me into brief moments of darkness that made the situation even more terrifying. As I rounded another corner, I noticed a small detail that sent shivers down my spine. There were smudges on one of the mirrors, faint handprints that looked like someone had been desperately trying to escape. I pressed my hand against the glass, feeling the cold surface, wondering if I was going mad. "Michael, you need to calm down," I muttered to myself, trying to steady my breathing. But it was impossible to shake the feeling that I was being watched, hunted even. The old man's words echoed in my mind. The mirrors trap more than just reflections. What did he mean by that? And why did he seem so serious? I heard another faint scream, closer this time. Sarah's voice, full of panic. I ran towards the sound, only to be met with more confusing reflections and dead ends. My mind played tricks on me, each reflection more distorted and horrific than the last. As I pressed on, the metallic scent grew stronger, and I started seeing signs of struggle. A torn piece of clothing here, a smear of something dark on a mirror there. The environment itself seemed to warn me, each detail a subtle hint that something was very wrong. The corridors grew narrower, and I felt the walls closing in on me. My claustrophobia kicked in, making it difficult to breathe. I forced myself to keep moving, knowing that stopping meant giving in to the terror that surrounded me. At one point, I saw a flicker of movement in a mirror. Not my own reflection, but that of the masked figure, slowly walking towards me. The figure moved with an eerie calm, as if it knew there was no rush. It would catch me eventually. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing loudly. The sense of dread grew with each step, the maze now feeling like a twisted game designed to break me. Every reflection seemed to mock my efforts, showing me scenes of horror that were becoming harder to distinguish from reality. I felt utterly alone, each turn leading me further away from safety and deeper into the nightmare. The House of Mirrors, once a fun attraction, had become a prison, and the masked figure was its warden. The deeper I went, the more the walls seemed to close in on me. My breathing grew ragged, each step feeling heavier than the last. I couldn't stop thinking about my friends. Where were they? Were they safe? Or were they as lost and terrified as I was? I heard a faint rustling behind me and spun around, only to see my own frightened reflection. My eyes, wide with panic, stared back at me from every angle. I felt trapped, not just physically, but mentally too. The House of Mirrors was playing tricks on my mind, and I was struggling to keep it together. "Get a grip, Michael," I whispered to myself. "You've been through worse. Just find a way out." But my pep talk didn't last long. The lights flickered again, and in the brief darkness, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. I picked up my pace, the sound of my own footsteps blending with those of my unseen pursuer. I turned a corner and froze. There he was, the masked figure, standing still in the center of the corridor. The knife in his hand glinted under the flickering lights. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. "What do you want?" The figure tilted his head slightly, almost curiously. He took a step forward, and I took a step back, my eyes darting around for an escape route. But the mirrors reflected only my fear and his calm, menacing presence. Desperation fueled my next move. I grabbed a nearby metal rod, probably part of the maze's support structure, and brandished it like a weapon. "Stay back," I yelled, my voice shaking. The masked man stopped, seeming to consider my threat. Then, with a swift, almost casual motion, he lunged at me. I swung the rod wildly, more out of panic than skill, and managed to deflect his initial attack. But he was relentless, his movements precise and controlled. It was clear he had done this before. We struggled, the confined space amplifying every sound, the clanging of metal, our grunts of effort, and the harsh breathing that filled the air. I felt a sharp pain as the knife grazed my arm, warm blood seeping through my shirt. The pain grounded me, focusing my mind. I pushed back with all my strength, managing to knock the masked man unbalanced. He fell against a mirror, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. For a brief moment, I saw his eyes through the mask, cold, calculating and devoid of mercy. I ran, ignoring the pain in my arm, desperate to find an exit. I turned corner after corner, my own blood leaving a trail behind me. I stumbled into a larger room, the center of the maze. There, I saw my friend's belongings. Sarah's scarf, Mark's jacket, scattered around. My heart sank. They were gone, and I was alone. The masked man entered the room, his movements calm and deliberate. He didn't need to hurry. He knew there was no escape. I backed away, my mind racing. I couldn't outrun him, and I was too exhausted to fight. Then I noticed something, a small, barely noticeable door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. Summoning the last of my strength, I bolted towards the door. The masked man moved to intercept, but I was faster. I threw myself through the opening, slamming the door shut behind me. I found myself in a narrow corridor, dimly lit and leading to the outside world. I stumbled out into the night, collapsing on the cold pavement. The bustling sounds of the carnival were distant but comforting. I was safe, or so I thought. In the aftermath, the police found no trace of my friends or the masked man. The House of Mirrors was dismantled, revealing nothing but shattered glass and empty corridors. They called it an urban legend, a prank gone wrong. But I knew better. I knew what I saw, what I experienced. As I tried to rebuild my life, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Every reflective surface haunted me, showing fleeting glimpses of the masked man. My friends' faces, distorted in terror, would appear in mirrors, windows, and even puddles. One night, as I sat in my apartment staring at my reflection in the window, I saw him again. The masked man, standing behind me, his knife glinting in the moonlight. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just my empty room and my racing heart. I realized then that the House of Mirrors wasn't just a place. It was a state of mind, a reflection of the darkest parts of humanity. And once you've seen it, it never really leaves you. The real horror wasn't the masked man, but the realization that anyone could become him. All it takes is a twist of fate, a moment of madness, and a willingness to let the darkness in you. To this day, I avoid mirrors. They show more than just our reflections. They reveal the evil that lurks within us all. And sometimes, when you look too closely, you might just see something staring back. The Carnival's curse. Detroit's summer carnival was always the highlight of the year. The air was electric with excitement, and the scent of fried dough and popcorn filled the night. The laughter of kids and the bright lights made everything seem magical. I was there with my best friends, Ryan, Liz, and Kayla. We were just looking for a good time, you know. I'm Mark, by the way. 17, lanky, with this messy brown hair that never stays put. I've lived in Detroit my whole life, and the carnival has always been the big thing every summer. It was the same routine every year, but this time, something felt off. Maybe it was just me, trying to shake the feeling. You see, I've got this thing about abandonment. My dad left when I was little, and it messed me up pretty good. Left me always feeling like people were going to disappear on me. So we were wandering around, playing games, riding the Ferris wheel, just soaking it all in. Then we saw the haunted house. It had been closed for a while, but now it was open again. We couldn't resist. It was famous for its scares, and we were all about that life. At the entrance, this creepy guy handed us our tickets. He was tall, with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. His voice was all raspy when he said, "Enter if you dare, but remember, not all who enter find their way out." "Yeah, sure," I laughed, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Come on, guys, let's go." Inside, the house was dark, with flickering lights and creaky floors. At first, it was all fun and games. We joked about the fake skeletons and the cheesy ghosts. But as we moved deeper, the atmosphere changed. The decorations looked too real, and there was this weird smell, like rust and something else I couldn't place. Ryan was leading the way, being all macho about it. "Man, this is nothing," he boasted, pushing open a door to a creepy old kitchen. Suddenly, Ryan screamed, and not the kind of scream you'd do for fun. It was a real, gut-wrenching scream. I turned to see him on the floor, his leg caught in a bear trap. Blood was everywhere, and he was crying out in pain. "Oh my God, Ryan," Liz gasped, her face pale. She grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. "We have to get him out of here," Kayla yelled, panic in her voice. "We need to find help." We tried to pry the trap open, but it was no use. The smell of blood and Ryan's cries filled the air. I started to freak out, my mind racing with thoughts of my dad leaving. That feeling of helplessness flooding back. The lights flickered more, and a voice crackled over an old intercom. "Welcome to my nightmare," it said, chilling me to the bone. "Only the clever survive." We were trapped, and this wasn't part of the attraction. This was real. We needed to find a way out before it was too late. "We have to move," I said, my voice shaking. "We can't stay here. Help me carry him." As we struggled to lift Ryan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that this nightmare was far from over. We struggled to carry Ryan through the dark, winding corridors of the haunted house. His leg was bleeding badly, and he was barely conscious. The flickering lights made everything seem more sinister. Each step echoed, amplifying our fear. "Hang in there, buddy," I whispered, more to myself than to him. My heart was pounding, and I could feel sweat trickling down my back. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a hallway lined with old portraits. Their eyes seemed to follow us, their expressions twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. The air grew colder, and the musty smell intensified. I glanced at Liz and Kayla. They looked as terrified as I felt. "This place is wrong," Kayla muttered, her voice trembling. "Something's not right here." "Keep moving," Liz urged, though her own voice shook. "We have to find a way out." We reached a door marked, "Staff Only." Desperation pushed us to try it. The door creaked open to reveal a maintenance area, cluttered with old tools and equipment. It was eerily quiet, save for the distant sound of carnival music, distorted and haunting. Liz found a rag and tried to bandage Ryan's leg, but it wasn't enough. We needed real help, and fast. As I scanned the room, I noticed something odd. A row of Polaroid photos pinned to the wall. Each one showed different parts of the haunted house, but the last few were unsettling. They showed people, visitors like us, trapped in various rooms, their faces contorted in fear. What the hell is this? I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. These are people like us. Kayla's eyes widened as she looked over my shoulder. Mark, we need to go. Now. We turned back to the hallway, but a sudden sound stopped us. A low, almost inaudible hum, like machinery starting up. The walls seemed to vibrate, and the light bulbs flickered more violently. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. As we moved cautiously forward, the floor beneath us seemed uneven, almost like it was shifting. Each step felt like walking on thin ice, ready to give way. The dim light cast long, menacing shadows that danced with our every move. We came across another room, this one decorated like an old, abandoned nursery. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces stared at us from dusty shelves. One of them, a clown doll, was missing an eye. Its remaining eye seemed to glint malevolently in the dim light. "Get out of my head, Mark," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the growing paranoia. As we crossed the room, Liz stepped on a loose floorboard, and a trapdoor swung open beneath her. She screamed as she grabbed the edge, dangling over a pit filled with sharp metal spikes. "Help me!" she cried, her fingers slipping. Kayla and I lunged forward, grabbing her arms and pulling her back up. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "We can't do this," she sobbed. "We have to get out of here." "We will," I promised, trying to sound confident. "We just have to stay together." We kept moving, every creak and groan of the house making my heart race. The further we went, the more I felt like we were walking into a trap. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew thick with dread. In the distance, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Someone was following us. I motioned for the others to stay quiet, and we pressed against the wall, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps stopped, and the silence was deafening. "What do we do?" Kayla whispered, her voice barely audible. "We keep moving," I said, though I wasn't sure if we could outrun whoever, or whatever, was hunting us. As we made our way down another dark corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded, like sheep to the slaughter. The haunted house wasn't just a carnival attraction. It was a carefully constructed labyrinth of terror, designed by someone with a twisted mind. And we were caught in its web, with no way out in sight. We moved through the haunted house, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on us. Ryan's breathing was shallow, and every step felt like we were dragging a mountain. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, guilt, and fear. I kept thinking about my dad leaving, that same sense of helplessness washing over me. "Mark, we need a rest," Liz said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her face pale. Kayla was no better, her hands trembling as she held onto Ryan. "No, we can't stop now," I insisted, though I felt just as drained. "We have to find a way out before it's too late." We turned another corner and found ourselves in a room that looked like an old workshop. Tools were scattered everywhere, and a workbench was covered in blueprints and diagrams. I walked over to the bench, my curiosity piqued despite the danger. "What is this place?" Kayla asked, her voice trembling. I picked up one of the blueprints. It was a detailed plan of the haunted house, complete with traps and hidden passages. My eyes widened as I realized the level of planning that had gone into this nightmare. "This guy's insane," I muttered. "He's been planning this for years." As I scanned the room, my gaze fell on a dark corner where a shadow moved. I froze, heart pounding. From the darkness, the gaunt man from the entrance emerged, his eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. "You kids are smarter than most," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "But it's too late to leave now." "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, stepping forward despite my fear. "What did we ever do to you?" He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "It's not about you. It's about them," he said, gesturing to the carnival outside. "They took everything from me. My job, my dignity. So I decided to take something back. Fear is a powerful tool, you know. It shows you who people really are. You're sick, Liz spat, her voice filled with anger and fear. He shrugged, unfazed. Maybe, but I'm also right. As he advanced on us, I felt a surge of desperation. We were trapped, outnumbered, and exhausted, but I couldn't let him win. Not after everything we'd been through. Guys, get Ryan out of here, I whispered to Liz and Kayla. I'll distract him. Mark, no, Kayla protested. You can't. Just go. I insisted, pushing Ryan towards them. No. They hesitated, but the look in my eyes must have convinced them, Thol. They started moving towards the door, dragging Ryan with them. I turned to face the man, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Come on then, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Let's finish this. He lunged at me, and we grappled in the dim light. I could feel his strength, his desperation, and it mirrored my own. But I wasn't fighting just for myself. I was fighting for my friends, for our survival. In the struggle, I managed to grab a heavy wrench from the workbench and swung it with all my might. It connected with his head, and he went down, hard. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I ran, catching up with the others as they reached a back exit. We burst into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The carnival sounds were still there, but they seemed distant, almost unreal. We flagged down a security guard, and within minutes, the police arrived. Ryan was rushed to the hospital, and the haunted house was swarmed with cops. They found the man, barely conscious, but alive. As they dragged him away, he locked eyes with me, and I saw a flicker of something. Maybe respect, maybe hatred. In the days that followed, the story came out. The man was a former employee, fired for negligence. He'd snapped, blaming the carnival for his life falling apart. He spent years planning his revenge, turning the haunted house into a death trap. Ryan recovered, but the scars would never fully heal. As for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man had been right about one thing. Fear does show you who people really are. It had shown me that I could be strong, that I could fight for those I cared about. But it had also shown me the darkness that can lurk in someone's heart. A few weeks later, I found a Polaroid on my doorstep. It was a picture of the haunted house, taken from inside. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "We're not done yet." The nightmare wasn't over. The carnival's curse had marked me, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it came calling again. The last ride. I never liked crowds, but when you have kids, you do things you wouldn't normally do. My name's Michael Reed, and I took my two kids, Emma and Noah, to the annual carnival in Chicago. It was a tradition my late wife, Sarah, loved. She used to say the carnival was the perfect escape from the everyday grind. Since she passed away in that accident 3 years ago, I've tried to keep the tradition alive for the kids' song. The carnival was in full swing. Bright lights, loud music, and the smell of fried dough everywhere. Emma, my little daredevil, couldn't wait to get on the Ferris wheel. I'm not a fan of heights, but her excitement was contagious. "Come on, Dad. It'll be fun," she said, tugging at my arm. I glanced at Noah, who shrugged and grinned. All right. Let's do it," I said, trying to sound more enthusiastic than I felt. We queued up, and before long, we were seated in one of the gondolas, slowly rising above the carnival. The city stretched out beneath us, the lights twinkling in the evening gloom. For a moment, it was peaceful. I could almost feel Sarah's presence with us, her laughter echoing in Emma's giggles. Suddenly, the Ferris wheel lurched to a stop. At first, we all laughed it off. These things happened, right? But as the minutes dragged on, the laughter turned to nervous chatter. "What's going on, Dad?" Noah asked, his voice small. I'm sure it's just a minor glitch, I said, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. But my stomach was churning. I tried to keep calm, not wanting to scare the kids. Then I noticed a man near the control booth. He looked out of place, disheveled, almost frantic. He was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. When he saw me looking, he locked eyes with me. His gaze was intense, almost manic. He shouted something, but I couldn't make it out over the distance and noise. Emma, always curious, leaned forward. What did he say, Dad? I don't know, sweetheart. Just stay seated, okay? I tried to keep my voice steady, but a shiver ran down my spine. Minutes felt like hours as we hung there, suspended in the air. Then, out of nowhere, the man from before appeared below us, yelling, "They should have listened." His words were eerie, cryptic, and they set my nerves on edge. Dad, what does he mean? Emma's eyes were wide, her earlier excitement gone. I don't know, Emma. Just stay calm, okay? I replied, trying to mask my own growing unease. We were finally brought back down, but the atmosphere had shifted. People were pointing and screaming, running away from the Ferris wheel. The carnival's joyful noise had turned into a chaotic din. I held Emma and Noah close, shielding them from the pandemonium. Back on the ground, I heard snippets of frantic conversations. Bodies. Carved. Someone said, their voice shaking. My heart raced. I had to see what was going on, but I also needed to keep my kids safe. Stay close to me, I told them, pulling them away from the growing crowd. As we moved, I saw the Ferris wheel operators and emergency responders huddled around a few gondolas. The expressions on their faces were ones of sheer horror. I managed to push my way through the crowd, my curiosity and fear battling within me. What I saw stopped me cold. 3 bodies, slumped in their seats, each with a single word carved into their foreheads. Liar, thief, and betrayer. The words gleamed darkly in the fading light, a gruesome spectacle that made my stomach churn. Dad, what's happening? Noah's voice was a whisper, filled with terror. I turned to him, my own fear reflected in his eyes. I don't know, buddy, but we need to get out of here. As we walked away from the horror, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of violence. It felt personal, like a message. And for some reason, I felt it was a message meant for more than just the victims. We got home, but the images of that night haunted me. I couldn't sleep. Sarah's death had been a huge blow, leaving a void that I was still struggling to fill. Now this horrific event felt like another weight added to my already burdened heart. I tried to put on a brave face for the kids, but inside I was shaken. And that man's words kept echoing in my mind. They should listen. Listen to what? And why did it feel like a warning meant for me, too? The days following the Carnival incident were a blur. Chicago moved on, as cities do, but I couldn't shake the images from my mind. I kept thinking about those words. Liar, thief, betrayer, and the man's haunting declaration. Life went back to normal, or at least it tried to. But something felt off, like an itch I couldn't scratch. At work, I found it challenging to focus. The numbers on my screen seemed meaningless, and I caught myself zoning out, replaying that night over and over. My coworkers noticed. Are you okay, Mike? One of them asked, concern etched on her face. Yeah, just didn't sleep well, I lied, forcing a smile. But sleep was elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bodies, the words carved into their foreheads. One evening, a week after the carnival, I took Emma and Noah to the park. They needed a distraction, and so did I. The kids played on the swings while I sat on a bench, watching them, trying to relax. The cool breeze felt good, but it carried a faint, unsettling scent, something metallic, like blood. I shook my head, dismissing it as my imagination. But then I noticed a man standing by a tree, watching us. He was tall, with a hood pulled low over his face. He didn't move, just stood there staring. My skin prickled with unease. "Hey kids, let's go get some ice cream," I called, trying to keep my voice light. Emma and Noah came running, their laughter a brief comfort. We left the park, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At the ice cream parlor, the sense of unease grew. The place was unusually empty, the only sound the hum of the freezers. As we sat down to eat, I noticed a newspaper left on a nearby table. The headline read, "Carnival Tragedy. Investigation Ongoing." I picked it up, scanning the article. It didn't reveal much new information, but it mentioned the 3 victims were linked through an old business deal gone wrong, involving fraud and betrayal. "Dad, can we go home now?" Emma's voice brought me back to reality. "Sure, honey. Let's go," I said, putting the paper down. As we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were just unreachable, hiding in plain sight. That night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. It was a soft scratching, like someone dragging a stick along the side of the house. I got up, my heart pounding, and peered through the blinds. Nothing, just the empty street, silent and still. But the feeling of unease lingered, a heavy presence in the darkness. The next day, I decided to look into the victims' pasts. Maybe if I understood why they were targeted, I could make sense of this nightmare. I started with old news articles and public records. It wasn't easy, and it took time away from my kids, but I had to know. I discovered they were all part of a company that went under amidst scandal. The details were murky, but it seemed they had cheated people out of money, lied about investments. The words carved into their foreheads began to make sense. Someone was seeking revenge for past wrongs. But who? And why in such a public, horrific way? Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of being watched never left me. I started seeing the hooded man more often. At the grocery store, outside my office, even near our house. Always at a distance, never approaching. It was like he was taunting me, daring me to figure out his game. One evening, as I was tucking Emma and Noah into bed, Noah looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Dad, who's that man who keeps watching us?" My blood ran cold. "What man, buddy?" "The one with the hood. I saw him at school today. He was just standing there, watching." I forced a smile, trying to hide my fear. Probably just someone waiting for their kid. Don't worry about it. But inside, I was terrified. This wasn't my imagination. Someone was stalking us, and I didn't know why. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but I couldn't fit them together. And every day, the sense of impending doom grew stronger, like a storm cloud on the horizon, ready to unleash its fury. As I lay in bed that night, I realized I had to protect my kids at all costs. Whatever this was, whoever was behind it, I had to find out before it was too late. The carnival's nightmare had followed us home, and I feared it was just the beginning. The tension had become unbearable. My every waking moment was haunted by the hooded man's shadow. The stress was taking its toll on me, and it showed. My kids were growing more anxious, and I felt like I was failing them. I had to find a way to end this. One evening, after putting Emma and Noah to bed, I sat down at my desk, staring at the pile of notes and articles about the victims. There had to be a connection I was missing. As I sifted through the papers, a pattern started to emerge. All 3 victims had betrayed not just their clients, but also a close business partner, a man named Robert Turner. I dug deeper and found that Turner had disappeared shortly after the company scandal. No one knew where he was, and his trail went cold years ago. My gut told me that Turner was somehow involved in this, seeking vengeance for the betrayals that ruined his life. But why target me and my family? My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old warehouse on Lincoln. Midnight. Come alone." Fear gripped me, but I knew I had no choice. This could be the key to ending the nightmare. I grabbed my coat, leaving a note for the kids in case I didn't come back, and headed out. The warehouse was a relic from the city's industrial past, now abandoned and decrepit. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay. I stepped inside, the only light coming from a single flickering bulb in the center of the vast empty space. "Michael Reed!" a voice called out, echoing through the darkness. The hooded man stepped into the light, pulling back his hood to reveal a gaunt, hollow face. It was Robert Turner. "You've been following me," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "Yes," Turner replied, his eyes burning with intensity. "I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be hunted, to live in fear." "Why?" I demanded. "What did I do to you?" Turner's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You didn't do anything, Michael, but you represent everything they took from me. A family, a future. They destroyed my life, and I had nothing left to lose. So I decided to make them pay." "You killed them," I said, the realization sinking in it. "You carved those words into their foreheads." Turner nodded. "They were liars, thieves, betrayers. They deserved it. And what about me? What about my kids? We didn't do anything to you." Turner's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "I never wanted to hurt you or your children. I wanted you to see to understand, but it seems I've gone too far." I took a step forward, my heart pounding. "It's not too late to stop this. You can turn yourself in. We can end this madness." Turner shook his head, his eyes filled with despair. "It's too late for me, Michael, but you can still protect your family." Suddenly, a noise behind me made us both turn. Emma and Noah were standing at the entrance, fear etched on their faces. "Dad, what's going on?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "Kids, get out of here!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Turner moved quickly, pulling out a gun. "No one's going anywhere," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm sorry, Michael. I really am." I stepped in front of my children, my heart racing. "If you want me, fine. But let them go. They're innocent." For a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of humanity in Turner's eyes. He lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping. "I never wanted this," he muttered. Suddenly, the warehouse door burst open, and the police swarmed in, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon!" they shouted. Turner hesitated, then threw the gun aside. He raised his hands, his face a mask of defeat. As the officers handcuffed him and led him away, he looked back at me, his eyes hollow. "Take care of your kids, Michael. Don't let them become like us." As the police took Turner away, I pulled Emma and Noah into my arms, holding them tightly. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. We stood there in the dim light, the weight of everything that had happened settling over us. In the days that followed, the full story came to light. Turner had indeed been wronged by his business partners, driven to madness by their betrayal. His quest for revenge had consumed him, turning him into the very thing he despised. As I tried to rebuild our lives, I couldn't help but reflect on Turner's final words. The true horror wasn't some supernatural force, but the darkness within humanity itself. It was a reminder of how easily we could be consumed by our own hatred and pain. In the end, the carnival had left more than just a memory. It had shown me the depths of human evil and the strength of family. As we moved forward, I vowed to protect my children from that darkness, to teach them compassion and forgiveness. Because in the face of true horror, those were the things that would keep us human. Carnival of Shadows. The carnival was always the highlight of the summer here in Los Angeles. Every year, it rolled into town with its dazzling lights, loud music, and the sweet smell of cotton candy filling the air. I remember feeling the same excitement as a kid, but this year was different. This year, I had a reason to face my fears and go back. You see, when I was 8, I got lost at a carnival. It might not sound like a big deal, but for a kid, it was terrifying. I was separated from my parents for hours, wandering through the chaos, crying and calling out for them. When they finally found me, I was hiding under a bench, scared out of my mind. That experience stuck with me, and ever since, big crowds and chaotic places have made me uneasy. But here I was, 32 years old, a graphic designer by trade, trying to overcome that old fear. My friends, Dave and Laura, had convinced me to join them at the carnival. "It'll be fun, Jake. You can't let one bad memory ruin it forever," Laura had said, her smile infectious. I didn't want to be the killjoy, so I agreed. The first night, everything seemed normal. We laughed, played games, and rode the Ferris wheel just like any other year. But as the week went on, things started to feel off. I noticed little things at first, like the clown who seemed to be watching me a bit too closely, and the fortune teller who gave me an eerie warning. She looked right at me and said, "Darkness within the lights. Beware the shadows." I laughed it off at the time, but her eyes were serious, almost pleading. Then, there were the missing person posters scattered around. I tried not to think much of them. Big city, people go missing all the time, right? One evening, I decided to walk around alone while Dave and Laura were busy at the ring toss. That's when I met Earl, an old carny who seemed out of place among the vibrant, youthful crowd. He had a weathered face and eyes that looked like they had seen too much. He grabbed my arm as I walked by and pulled me close. "Not all that glitters here is gold, son. Beware the shadows," he whispered, his breath smelling of stale cigarettes. "Earl, right? What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to pull away. "Just remember what I said," he replied, letting go of my arm and disappearing into the crowd. The words stuck with me, even though I tried to shake them off. The carnival that once felt like a place of joy now felt like a trap, and I couldn't ignore the growing unease in my gut. Every laugh sounded like a scream, and every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat. Later that night, I told Dave and Laura about Earl. "Sounds like a typical carny trying to spook you," Dave said with a shrug. "Don't let it get to you, man." "Yeah, Jake, it's probably just part of the act. You know how they are," Laura added, setting out to reassure me. But I could see the doubt in her eyes too. As the days passed, I noticed more unsettling things. Carnival workers with vacant expressions, people disappearing into the shadows, and that creeping feeling that I was being watched. I tried to talk to my friends about it, but they were too busy having fun to notice. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself wandering back to the carnival alone. The flashing lights seemed dimmer, the music more distorted. It felt like I was stepping into another world, one where the cheerful facade hid something dark and sinister. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of uncovering a horrifying truth that would change my life forever. The carnival had an odd vibe that night. The air was cooler than usual, with a dampness that clung to my skin. As I walked through the midway, the flashing lights seemed to flicker more than normal, casting strange dancing shadows on the ground. The cheerful music had a distorted, almost haunting quality to it, like an old record played too slowly. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, and I noticed the crowds were thinner. The laughter and chatter sounded distant, almost hollow. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. But then I saw her again, the girl from the funhouse. She was standing by the entrance, her eyes wide and terrified. She looked around frantically, as if searching for someone. I walked over to her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, "you have to help me. They're watching." Who's watching?" I asked, but before she could answer, a carnival worker appeared out of nowhere. He was tall and burly, with a face that seemed almost blank, devoid of any emotion. He grabbed the girl's arm roughly and started to drag her away. "Hey, what are you doing? Let her go," I shouted, but he didn't even look at me. The girl glanced back at me, her eyes pleading, before disappearing into the shadows. My heart raced as I stood there, trying to process what had just happened. I knew I had to do something, but what? I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was standing alone in a carnival that suddenly felt very hostile. I started walking again, my senses on high alert. The smell of popcorn and hot dogs, which usually made my mouth water, now made me feel nauseous. The vibrant colors of the tents and rides seemed to bleed together, creating a surreal, almost nightmarish landscape. I noticed more missing person posters, their faces staring back at me with haunting eyes. As I passed by the games, I saw a group of carnival workers huddled together, speaking in low, urgent tones. They glanced at me suspiciously, their eyes cold and hard. I quickened my pace, feeling their gaze follow me. Near the edge of the carnival, I spotted a black tent I hadn't noticed before. It was set apart from the rest, hidden in the shadows. Something about it drew me in, a morbid curiosity mixed with dread. I approached cautiously, the flap slightly open, revealing only darkness inside. The sound of footsteps behind me made me jump. I turned to see Earl standing there, his expression unreadable. "I told you to beware the shadows," he said quietly. "Earl, what is going on here? Who are those people? What's in that tent?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Things ain't always what they seem," he replied cryptically. "Sometimes the light hides more than it shows." Before I could press him further, he turned and walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. The eerie atmosphere, the girl's terrified face, and Earl's cryptic warnings swirled in my mind, creating a sense of impending doom. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. The carnival, once a place of joy and excitement, now felt like a twisted maze with hidden dangers lurking around every corner. Every step I took felt heavier, every sound sharper. The carnival was changing, revealing its true nature, and I was right in the middle of it. As I made my way back to the crowded areas, trying to act normal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening. The shadows seemed to grow darker, and the cheerful facade of the carnival was cracking, revealing the sinister reality underneath. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The next day, I couldn't get the images out of my mind. The girl's terrified face, the sinister black tent, Earl's cryptic warnings. I tried to go about my day, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the carnival. Something was very wrong, and I couldn't just ignore it. I met up with Dave and Laura that evening, determined to share my concerns. "Guys, something's seriously off at the carnival. I saw this girl being dragged away by a worker, and there's this creepy black tent. Earl warned me again," I said, my voice urgent. "Jake, you need to let this go," Dave said, frustration evident in his tone. "You're just scaring yourself over nothing." Laura looked more sympathetic, but still doubtful. "Maybe you're just overthinking things, Jake. But if it really bothers you, maybe we should check it out together." "Thank you," I said, relieved. I need to know I'm not going crazy. That night, we headed back to the carnival. As we approached, the usual sights and sounds felt more ominous. The lights flickered, casting long shadows, and the music seemed more distorted than ever. We made our way to the black tent, sticking close together. As we got closer, we heard muffled voices from inside. I held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. "We need to be careful," I whispered. We crept up to the tent, and I slowly lifted the flap. Peering inside, what I saw made my blood run cold. Inside were rows of cages, each containing a person. Their faces were gaunt, eyes hollow with despair. Among them was the girl I had seen before, now bruised and terrified. "We have to do something," I whispered urgently. "Jake, we need to call the police," Laura said, her voice shaking. Dave nodded, his face pale. Suddenly, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned to see a group of carnival workers, led by the tall, burly man who had taken the girl. His face twisted into a cruel smile. "Looks like we got some curious cats," he sneered. We tried to run, but they were too fast. They grabbed us, dragging us into the tent. Panic surged through me as we were thrown to the ground, surrounded by grim faces. Earl stepped forward, his eyes full of regret. "I warned you, Jake. I told you to stay away," he said quietly. "Earl, you knew about this. You're part of this," I asked, betrayal and anger mixing in my voice. "I'm trying to help from the inside, but there's only so much I can do," he replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "These people are dangerous." "Why, Earl? Why do you stay?" I demanded. "Sometimes it's the only way to protect the ones you care about," he said, glancing at the cages. Before I could respond, the burly man interrupted. "Enough talking. Time to teach these kids a lesson." Chaos erupted. Dave fought back, getting a few punches in before being overpowered. Laura screamed, struggling against her captors. I managed to break free, adrenaline fueling my movements. I lunged at the burly man, knocking him unbalanced. The distraction was enough to create an opening. "Run!" I shouted to Dave and Laura. We scrambled out of the tent, sprinting towards the main carnival area. The workers were hot on our heels, but the crowd provided some cover. We darted through the throngs of people, desperate to escape. We reached the police station, breathless and terrified. I spilled out everything, and soon the authorities swarmed the carnival. The black tent was uncovered, and the captives were freed. The carnival workers were arrested, their human trafficking ring exposed. But the real twist came later. In the days that followed, it became clear that the ring was much larger than just the carnival. Earl's warning about shadows hinted at a widespread network, reaching far beyond the carnival grounds. The authorities uncovered connections to other cities and events, revealing a dark web of exploitation and corruption. As I sat in my apartment reflecting on everything, I realized Earl's cryptic advice was his way of trying to protect me. He was trapped, a part of the system he despised, doing what little he could to warn others. The true horror wasn't just the carnival. It was the realization of how deep and far-reaching the evil ran, hidden in plain sight. The carnival was gone, but the shadows it left behind lingered. I couldn't shake the image of those cages, the hollow eyes of the captives. I had faced my fear, but what I uncovered was far worse than any childhood nightmare. Evil had a human face, and it was far more terrifying than I ever imagined.